somebody came into the courtroom and said that your character Jenkins wouldn't be wearing that in court, and you just casually on your phone showed a picture of Jenkins in court wearing that very outfit.
Yeah, that was fucking.
And you did the research. You knew exactly what you were going to be doing that day. You knew the character better than, in some ways, better than we knew it after researching it for 2 years.
As you'll see very, very quickly, I ain't fucking Walter Cronkite. Like, it's not what, I'm doing this for a very sort of specific reason, trying to bring folks in and talk to folks that I admire deeply and that I respect greatly, and I think are sort of a model of what they do, and people who walk the walk, don't just talk about it. And but they get mad because I never really do like proper introductions. But look, man, you're one of the greatest American writers of all time, and everybody, and you've been, just today I was reading, you've been compared to Faulkner, you've been compared to Twain, you've been compared, it's like,
I don't think so.
Well,
go ahead.
It's funny because Dennis
talking,
told me
man.
not to say that, because Dennis was like, told me you would be like, John, go fuck yourself, shut up. But it's true.
Well, I actually don't think I've ever been compared
I'll
to
show
Faulkner.
you the article, man. I'll show you I was like, hey, Pop, I get, with that kind of research stuff, I always ask my dad. I told you my dad's like a huge fan of yours, and like huge fan, you're his favorite writer. And so I asked him to like, and he was, and I'll show you the article, man. You were compared to Ann Chandler. But look, I you've been a DC guy your whole life.
Yeah.
We both, grew up right here in this city. And I guess like just first and foremost, just tell me a little bit about growing up in DC, what you love about the city and all that.
Well, I'm fortunate in a lot of ways. And one of them, I think, is that I grew up at a time that sort of straddled different eras. And so I remember Washington before everybody in DC that's lived here a long time breaks it up before 1968 and after 1968.
Because of the riots.
The riots, yeah, that followed in the wake of the Dr. King assassination. I mean, I always say that the riots, however much destruction and negativity are associated with the riots, it accelerated the civil rights movement by 10 years in one weekend.
Wow.
And it's where Dr. King was going too. He was not, a lot of columnists now, right-wing type columnists will always say, that's not what Dr. King wanted. First of all, how do you know what he wanted?
Yeah.
And there's all indications that towards the end of his life, he was getting fed up with 100% peaceful protests.
What were some of those indications? Like what?
I mean, I think in some of his speeches, he was starting to say, the actual speech that he gave at the National Cathedral, which I'll get back to that, but I saw it.
Wow.
He said something like, I fear that if things don't change very quickly this summer, meaning the coming summer, we're going to see some violence. Those weren't his exact words, but he predicted it.
Yeah.
And he was also coming out very strongly against the Vietnam War. His focus was changing into a broader sort of type of protest of the American government in all respects, not just in racial relations, but their actions overseas and so on. He was changing.
Yeah.
That Sunday, I came out of St. Sophia Greek Orthodox Cathedral, which is my church, and I heard a guy's voice. I heard a man's voice coming out over loudspeakers. And I walked across the street, and I walked behind the cathedral, which is right there, into the gardens and all that. And there was like 1,000 people back there.
Yeah.
And I stood back there with the people, and I listened to Dr. King speak. Wow. And I didn't understand really what he was talking about.
How old were you?
I was 11.
Wow.
But I could see on the people's faces that what he meant to people, because they were he had their rapt attention.
Yeah.
And then 4 days later, he was assassinated.
Wow.
And the riots came. So that, all that year and that summer, and me going down there and working for my father, and my dad obviously is a Greek guy, and then all black employees, about 5 people that they're longtime employees. On the other side of the counter, white people wearing ties, white professionals for the most part.
And did that change after the riots?
No, but Yeah, I mean, we had black customers, but for the most part, it was white professionals wearing ties, mostly men, sitting at that counter, and that counter was symbolic to me,
Yeah,
on a not on an intellectual level, but
yeah.
I felt what side of the counter was I on.
You were in the back.
I was on the side with my father and his help,
Yeah.
and um, everything I've written about has come from that.
Wow.
That's what sparked me to be a writer.
Wow.
I didn't understand it, but I knew that there was something there.
I mean, just that time in DC and then going into the 70s, like it just must have been just a crazy. I mean, like night and day difference then. I mean, what sort of the city became, and like what was that like as like coming into being a teenager?
Growing up around here,
Yeah.
it was cool.
Yeah.
I you know I loved to be out there. I loved playing basketball, pickup basketball all over
Yeah.
the city.
Yeah. Where'd you
Um,
play ball at?
any place we would drive around and just find games.
You and your friends?
Yeah,
Who were your friends?
a bunch of ethnic guys, Greek
Uh-huh.
guys, Jewish,
Uh-huh.
Italian.
Uh-huh. And what you had a nickname?
Not till later.
Okay. And what was the nickname?
Well, shoe dog.
Shoe dog?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Well, what was your game like, man?
Just I wasn't great, but I had heart.
Yeah. Scrappy.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, I really one of the things I wanted to do when I grew up was play basketball, and I never grew up.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I never grew taller.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
I had to give up that dream real fast.
And talk about just a little bit like basketball in this city. I grew up in a basketball family. My dad played in college. My little brother played in college. My dad had a Sunday morning game, still has a Sunday morning game. It's been going since 1972. And if you were at my dad's house, it didn't matter, man. You literally you could walk in from the bars at 6 a.m. If you slept in that house, he was waking your ass up. You were playing basketball at 7:30. Like you had no choice. Uh,
Sounds like fun.
yeah, dude. I mean, you know,
I got to say that I'm getting to be an old guy. Like I'm 64 years old, and one of the only things that I really hate about is I can't play basketball anymore. It didn't happen yesterday. It happened like when I got in my 50s,
mhm.
and I have dreams about playing basketball
Wow.
all night, like getting into games, and that's the only way I can play anymore. My
What do you love
dreams.
about what do you miss about it the
I
most?
just to me there was nothing better than playing a game of basketball with guys, even guys you didn't know,
Especially, yeah.
and going after it.
Mhm,
Trying to
mhm,
win.
mhm.
We used to play for push-ups. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
guys ever did that, but
yeah. I mean, really for us, it was just like talking shit, bragging rights, and then like people, you had courts that you kind of claimed and stuff like that. My old man always talks about how you can get a guy on a basketball court and you can tell anything about him. You can judge their character in like 2 seconds. Do you feel the same?
I know what he's talking about. Yeah,
It's like if a guy shoots all the time or if he wants to work the ball, do you
right.
hustle? So I guess when I ask about your game, like, what would be the strengths of your game, would you say?
I mean, I surprised people. I could go to the hoop.
Yeah.
You know, that was a surprise because I'm not big at all.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
average.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and but I like to dish too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I like to set stuff up.
As far as like the racial dynamic of this city and like how this city, the kind of character of this city, is there anything like specifically basketball? Did you find that as like a great equalizer? Did you find when you went to court sometimes that you weren't really accepted?
Well, both, but I do feel like sports and work are two places where that's where you meet people who aren't like you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really, and of course sports is a meritocracy, so you can prove yourself out
Sure.
there or not. It doesn't matter who your father is.
Absolutely.
Um, but that's where I met a lot of people that weren't from my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It was sports,
Yeah.
and then on the job.
Uh-huh.
And I always worked these fun jobs. Like even when I wasn't working for my dad, I ended up doing a lot of retail. And then in my 20s, I worked in bars and kitchens and things like that. And I couldn't wait to get to work. I mean, the reason the shoe dog nickname is I worked at a place called the Bootlegger during college. During college,
Uh-huh.
here there was these. They had a few shoe stores in D.C.
Uh-huh.
and they were catered to. They were the beautiful shoes it's the best shoes in Washington. So we got the best looking women coming in there,
Okay.
and they hired like all guys to work the floor, and for obvious reasons. And it was the most fun job I ever had. Like even today, like if you said, well, could I go back and work on that shoot floor again, I'd give up everything that I've done. uh, it's true. I mean, it was just amazing.
Yeah.
And but also, there you learn a lot about people there too, because it was straight commission. It was really competitive, very competitive.
Mm.
And it was so much fun.
And in your teenage day, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, and I've just heard some things. Obviously, I'm close with one of your sons, but you got into a fair bit of trouble as well as a young man. Can you just talk to me sort of about that and about like kind of the kind of things that you were getting into, and just describe sort of that part of your life and why you think you were making those kinds of decisions?
Well, I'll talk about it in the context of why I do a lot of things that I do now. In other words, why I've been for a long time. I go into juvenile detention places, and I go into the DC jail, and I do these writing programs and reading programs and stuff like that. I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways. First of all, I grew up in a house where I had everything I needed, and I'm not talking about money because we didn't have money, but food, shelter, love. That's all you need. I firmly believe that. That's all a kid needs. So I had that. But being a boy, I was attracted to the other side of life, and I screwed up quite a bit. And so like there was a lot of things. I'm not going to detail everything, and I'm not even going to say that it was when I was just a kid, because when I was 28, I got arrested for a lot of things that happened one night. Started out with an altercation in a parking lot. It ended with the police chasing me, a high-speed chase, and I got charged with a whole rack of stuff. Assault, fleeing and eluding the police, driving on the sidewalk, all kinds of things like that. And I was 28, so I can't even chalk that up to being a kid, right?
I know exactly what you mean, man.
And but I didn't get sent to jail
So what
again.
did the fact that you didn't get in trouble, that you didn't get put in the system, that you still were, I imagine your old man still
Well, the
supported
police,
you.
they called me the next day because I lost them that night. I lost them in that chase. I knew the streets, and they didn't know those streets. So they called me and they said, we got your license number. Like, or you want to come in, or you want us to come get you? So I drove to my parents' house and I said, Mom, I was getting ready to get married in a few months.
What the fuck?
And I said, Mom, Dad, I'm about to go in and get arrested and stuff like that. I had to do that. I went in there because they didn't catch me, and I was drunk, and I'm probably sure there was cocaine involved too, because it was the '80s, and I was doing that too. And because they didn't catch me that night, they couldn't get me on the substance stuff,
Yeah.
drunk driving and everything. So I didn't go to jail. But I got put in. They made me go to this thing at night where I went with all these other people like me, and I took a look around in that class, and there was guys like carving swastikas into the desk and all that shit. And the first thing that I thought was, man, these guys are a bunch of losers.
Yeah.
But then the second thing I thought was, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I'm sitting with them. I'm not the guy at the front of the class. I'm one of these guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it woke me up, man.
So that was your moment right there. And that, so, but whatever happened from, whatever was going on up until there, you're still talking about like there's a long period of time where I imagine you were in situations where you could have learned that lesson, where for other people,
I wasn't ready yet.
It wasn't ready. You could have hit that rock. I mean, I very similar thing with
Right.
me. It was just like it kept happening. And I think my last one actually was in my 30s, which is horribly embarrassing, but it was just one time I saw it, and that was it. I don't know what the word is, whether it's some sort of guilt or some sort of injustice in the fact that you were able to kind of do these things happened and you didn't get thrown into the system, whether you want to call it blind luck, whether you want to call it prejudice, whatever it is that you didn't, and you're living in a city where kids are getting locked up left and right sometimes for shit they didn't
Exactly.
do.
I mean, you hit it right on the head. Like they came into my house, into a white house. They saw that I was there with two loving parents, and they're like, we're not going to charge this kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think probably the same thing I had a lawyer for that last incident. We'll skip right to that,
Mhm.
where a lot of people can't get a lawyer other
That's
than
right.
a disinterested public defender.
That's right.
And, I walked in there with wearing a suit and I had a job and all that stuff. And the judge probably looked at me and said, this guy's not an asshole. I'm not gonna, but most of the kids don't even know to go in there and put a tie on
Right.
or get a haircut. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
And that's takes me to the reason I'm willing to talk about this stuff is because that's why I know there, but for the grace of God go I. Like those kids that are not all of them. There's some bad kids in that are sociopaths and stuff
Mhm.
like that. But for the most part, they're just like me. They were stupid boys who did stupid things because their heads are scrambled.
Yep.
And there's a science to it too. Like they take pictures of the brain and they show that a 17-year-old kid, the brain is crowded with like confusion. The colors and everything are.
Yeah.
And then you take a picture of that same brain 5 years later, and its conscience and reasoning have taken over.
Yeah.
The color codes for that
Yeah.
have dominated the brain. That you grow up.
Yeah.
And so then that's when I started going into. I started in DC schools, and then I said, well, there's kids in school that are at Oak Hill and which became New Beginnings. They have a school there too. I should go out there and talk to those kids. And then I started going through the Free Minds Book Club, this organization here in town. I started going in talking to juveniles, the juvenile block at the DC jail, which is for kids that have committed really serious crimes and they're getting ready to transition into the federal prison system when they turn 18. I do this reading program there through the Free Minds Book Club.
Did you say in the moment, well, I know this same shit isn't happening to this guy, or this guy, and I just got lucky here? Is it something you knew inherently, or is it something that you understood kind of looking back on it? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think it's more looking back on it
Mhm.
and going to these places and getting involved. I don't want to sound like I'm Rosa Parks or something like that, like I'm doing some great thing. There's an amount of guilt to it too, because I go to the DC jail or I go to New Beginnings and then I'm there for an hour and then I walk out to my nice car and you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Like I can't really help them in a way that I want to. And I don't even have the commitment to do that, honestly. But once you do go in there and you get to know some of these people, the young guys, especially, they know what they did and they know what they're facing.
Yeah.
And I have more attentive meetings with those young people than I do when I go into public schools and private schools like this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're more receptive to.
There's a hunger for it. There's a hunger for that connection.
Yeah.
You're gonna look at me, I'm gonna look at you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, during the 80s, it was just, it was a pretty brutal time when you talk about crack and AIDS.
Turned.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like talk a little bit about DC in the 80s, with being in Mayor Barry's DC. Was that a dark time for you, or was it fun as fun? Like what was that like? And also, I guess, like in that period of time where you were getting in trouble, did you know there was more to life for you? Did you know that like you were kind of better than that, or there was something bigger, or were you just having fun, or did you not really think about it like that?
The 70s was a lot of fun, just straight up fun.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
You didn't really worry about random shit happening to you, like catching a bullet when you're on the street or there. You always got tested. There were fights and stuff, but it was physical fights. It was, and the other side, even the drugs were better. Like it was communal. Like you smoked weed with your friends.
Yeah.
In the 80s, people went in the bathroom by themselves and did coke.
Yeah.
Like that's no fun.
Yeah.
and also AIDS came in the 80s. So like before that, it was like people in the 70s, you didn't even use condoms.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you just assumed, well, she's on the pill and
you're good.
You're good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just fun. And then it kind of like, I always think of the 80s as like you're climbing up this mountain in the 70s and then you got to go down the other side of the mountain in the 80s, and the other side of the mountain, the sun's not shining on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't like that decade at all. I had good things happen to me. I got married and things like that, but I didn't. I don't look at it fondly, and it's when they started coming down on people for the three strikes thing and all that, and that's what we continue to write about, like in our show, which is the effect of the drug war on people, locking people up for nonviolent crimes.
That's kind of where I was going. Like, do you feel like the '80s and sort of the beginning of the war on drugs through all your writing and everything you've done on TV and in novels? Um,
I try to write about it, and I feel like I'm in my novels. I feel like kind of leaving a history of this town. That's why I've only written about Washington in my novels. And so, I've done the '70s, I've done the '80s, the '90s, and I've it's always been a not a political in the sense of like who the mayor is and stuff, but political in the sense of why things are the way they are. I'm really interested in why things work the way they do and how people get crushed by the system
yeah,
when it's working against them. You brought up Barry. I'll probably get hate mail for this, but you know, you always do. But when you bring up his name, because people are so passionate about it, but he's the best mayor the city ever had. And on one side, he was a great mayor. On the other side, he was a human being who had faults. And he created a black middle class here in a lot of ways. There was always an upper class black population here. Harlem Renaissance. We had our own Harlem Renaissance in the 20s, and there was always that, and Dunbar High School and so on. But Barry created a black middle class.
how did he? I mean, I've heard people say that. Wow.
Jobs, government jobs. He created not only government jobs, summer jobs for kids, the summer jobs program.
Yeah,
I had one, my first job, at, outside of my
outside the
dad.
diner. Yeah,
I worked for the rec department,
yeah,
$1.60 an hour. That was a summer jobs program. And every you talk to Washingtonians my age, and they almost all of them say I got my first job because of Marion Barry.
yeah,
Not only that, he built all sorts of senior living facilities for people east of Rock Creek Park and east of the river, where there was none. But people always want to throw shade on him, and even I'll tell you a story. Like I did a script for based on his life that I was commissioned to do. And the studio guy that was giving me notes kept coming back to the same thing. But why did he do it? Why did he smoke crack? Why was he chasing women? And this went on for months and months. And finally, I said to the guy, I said, because he wanted me to go back and say, did he have daddy issues and what happened was, I said, he liked power and he liked pussy. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Like,
Like,
that's just that simple.
and he
Yeah,
was a great mayor. Why
yeah,
can't you deal with that?
yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah.
know, he was a human
But
being.
everyone knew he was doing that, right? I mean, like that
Yeah,
wasn't a surprise. I
right.
mean, like,
Yeah, just like Kennedy.
yeah, I mean, everyone knew everyone. I mean, I remember like being a little boy, and my dad was like, "Yeah, Mayor Barry, what I mean, it's prostitutes and shit." Like it was just kind of like a known.
Well, it was tragic because he was so bright and did so many good things. It
Yeah.
was tragic on a personal level, but I don't know why people took it personally, like why they hated him so much.
And do you think Len Bias plays a role in that?
Well, I wrote a book, The Sweet Forever, which takes place over the NCAA the tournament, and then his death. It ends in his death, and what it meant. It meant so much to Washingtonians. I
It
know
really
that
did.
you must know a lot of people who stopped doing coke after Len
one
Bias
Hundred
died.
percent.
A
100%.
lot of people.
I mean, I was a little boy, but it's one of that and when the Challenger blew up, and when Mayor Barry got was on TV with smoking that pipe.
Landmarks.
But like those are I remember exact. I mean, I was little, under 10, but I remember exactly where I was when each three of those things happened. And Len Bias was just like couldn't stopped us all in our tracks. We were like, what in the
Yeah, I
world?
mean, I still have a picture of him in my office on my office wall, palming those two
Yeah,
basketballs. Like, and I saw him play.
yeah,
He was as good as Jordan in my opinion. He
yeah,
would what a waste. Like, had they played together
yeah,
in the NBA,
yeah,
I saw him. He was incredible, man.
Yeah.
All he was a young guy who was celebrating. He wasn't a cokehead or anything like that. He just did too much on one sitting. He was celebrating. He just got signed to the NBA. You know.
You know, I've been kind of connected to you since the day I met you, and I admire you and look up to you for a shit ton of reasons, which I want to get into. But
I admire you too, John.
Thanks, George. But like, no, man, it's motherfucker. Anyway, but you know, growing up in a city like this, in a predominantly black city, the hypocrisy is just like, it's like right in your face all the time, and I really, really felt it both out, like in the way that you know, I got in trouble with the law, you know, quite a bit, and that same thing, it like really affected me. How and it didn't make me say, hey, I'm not going to go run to my dad. Hey, I'm not going to go run and get all the help that I can. And my old man was like, by all means necessary, we are going to like try with whatever we can to keep you out of the system. But at the same time, it was never lost on either one of us how ridiculously fucking unfair that is.
Yeah.
But even right here in this school, you know, I was a terrible kid and a terrible troublemaker, but somehow I graduated from this place, and I have, you know, many dear, you know, black brothers who got thrown out and who did do far less, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that hypocrisy has really shaped, like, it's just shaped me in so many different ways. And I'm wondering whether, like, when you say you see Len Bias, like the narrative was, here's another, you know, black, you know, drug addict and the crack epidemic and the war on, you know,
That's
like,
not what happened.
it's not at all,
Yeah.
right? But like, do you think that is unique to you being a DC guy, that you understood that?
I don't know. I just think it's the totality of your life experience shapes how you look at people and things. You know. I mean, watching your interview with Natalie, something stood out to me that she was talking about how you can't just judge people on their politics or even their racial politics. Like, I'll give you an example. Like my kids, like my sons. You know, my sons are black, and all my kids are adopted. So they got to be friends with these guys when they were growing up, whose father was pretty, you know, rough around the edges, and I knew he. Just in talking to him, I knew he had, you know, like problems with black people and stuff like that. He's way older than I am, so he grew up in the 50s. Very tough guy. But I didn't stop being friends with him or anything like that. And it wasn't like I didn't want my kids around him. And when my kids were with him, like if he took them out to McDonald's or something like that, or drove them to football practice, I felt like they were safer with him than they were with any of the liberal guys I knew in the neighborhood, because if any shit went down, he'd take a bullet for my kids.
That's right.
Even though he had racial problems in his head, he loved my kids, you know, and he was tough enough to defend them if he had to.
Yep.
And he would.
Yep. Yep.
So, you know, don't, you know, like, just because somebody plants a Black Lives Matter flag in their yard, it doesn't really mean anything to me.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man. I'm with you there. And tell me just a bit about, I mean, like, you know, your choice and your decision to write, and like how that came about. And I imagine it's all connected. But your first novel is Firing Offense.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like, I know a little bit of that is like the DC, like kind of like hardcore scene, the punk rock scene.
Yeah.
Like, were you into that scene, or?
Yeah.
I was like 930 Club and Fugazi and Bad Brains.
Yeah, I know a bunch of those guys, and
Yeah.
they're all my generation.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. But also in Washington, they were hooked up. Like, they'd sometimes have shows with go-go bands.
Yep.
And they were really trying to get black kids and white kids to be together.
Yep.
And we would be together, it didn't work in the larger sense. Like, it's not like we were that night we were over in Southeast or something, hanging out. But for that afternoon, we were.
Right.
And it was the punk rock thing in Washington was a very positive thing. It's a positive force.
Yep.
It wasn't like the scenes in the other cities where there was a lot of violence and drugs and stuff like that. It was a good thing.
Yep. Yep.
So that was a big deal. Yeah.
What led you to write that book, and like what got you into writing?
I just had this one story in my head that I always wanted to write. I only wanted to write one book. this is going to sound corny, but to prove that I was here, that I existed. I always thought, well, if I could have a book in a library
Yeah.
after I'm gone 100 years from now, and my name's on that book, it meant that I was here. That I did something.
So you knew when you were writing, you were like, this is gonna get. I want to get this published, and I want to get it out to the world.
I didn't know shit. I had never written anything before. I had a feeling that I could do it, and I
Because
didn't.
what you saw the totality of the story, or you
I knew I could tell the story. I didn't know how to write a book. I never took a writing class. I didn't know any agents. I didn't know any other writers. I had no connection to anything. I did it, and I sent it up to New York, and I forgot about it. I sent it up to a publisher, one publisher in New York, randomly. I knew they published a lot of crime novels, and I just didn't. I didn't call them or anything, or write them. And then a year later, they called me, and they said, we just picked this up off the slush pile. We want to publish it. That's what happened.
and in that year, did you write anything else?
I started writing another book
Because
because
you
I
loved
liked it. Yeah.
And why did you stay? Why stay in crime? Why stay in DC?
I think the crime thing gave me an engine, to a narrative engine. I don't know how to write a book where people are just talking about their feelings.
Yeah.
Shit has to happen.
Yeah.
It's got to be conflict, and
Yeah.
conflict is. I mean, drama is conflict, right? And then life and death is the highest form of conflict. So, crime. And then the crime thing allowed me to go to the other side of town, which hadn't been written about. And there was no writers writing about any Washington novels except for politics and
bullshit.
spies.
Yeah. Yep.
And now, I mean, now of course there are. I mean, look, you got Ed Jones, which I think he's the greatest writer. Edward P. Jones is the greatest writer who's ever come out of Washington. He went to Cardozo, D.C. public school.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, some would argue that you are, but yeah, I hear you.
Oh, only you.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Tell me a little bit about just like truth and research, and I know why truth is so important to me. I know what it like kind of does for me, of like finding the real story, having that, and diving into that. What is it for you? Like why are you? I mean, on set with you and David, you guys know what the fuck you're doing, and you like things a certain way, but if something really happened a certain way, that always wins the day. And I'm just wondering why. I'm wondering what that means to you.
I just I think if you're going to write about or make a show about people, and especially people in the neighborhoods, when I say in the neighborhoods, like locals that don't have a lot, and don't get written about a lot. I mean, that's the thing, is like I felt like, first of all, I'm going to write about stuff that doesn't normally get written, people that don't normally get their place in the light, because American novels are mostly about people who succeed. They're not. I want to write books about, like, a guy who's a dishwasher in a kitchen,
Yeah.
and at the end of the book, he's still a dishwasher,
Yeah.
but he lived his life a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're going to do that, you need to respect people, especially what you haven't said, but a white writer writing black characters sure as hell needs to respect people enough to go out there and listen to people, and get involved, and not in their lives, but to get the voices right.
How does that is it the same across, like when you go and you do it in DC? Because I've seen how you are on set, and I've seen how you are about the truth, and I've seen how you are about your research, and
Well,
just the respect and
I mean,
reverence that you come with.
that's pot calling the kettle black, because when you came to Baltimore, you completely immersed yourself in
Yeah.
that, in what you were portraying, and you brought stuff to set that we didn't know. In fact, one of my best memories of this show is when somebody said that somebody came into the courtroom and said that your character Jenkins wouldn't be wearing that in court, and you just casually on your phone showed a picture of Jenkins in court wearing that very outfit.
Yeah, that was fucked up.
And I'll never forget it, because
Yeah.
you did the research. You
Yeah.
knew exactly what you were going to be doing that day, you know?
You know, I guess for me though, man, I feel like if I don't do that, I'm fucking lost as shit.
Yeah, but
But
nobody told you to do that. Like you brought a lot to the show in a lot of ways, but also you knew the character better than, and sometimes better than, in some ways better than we knew it after researching it for 2 years, and you did all that on your own, which I'm really thankful for.
well, look, I appreciate you saying that.
Like
Like,
I didn't set you up to go riding with these guys and hang out with the police and go on rides and this and that. I didn't do that.
yeah,
You
yeah.
did it.
You know, for me, it's like, yeah, there's no question. I think we're the same. We have the same relationship with it, that it's got to be about respect. Like, if you're going to do that, if you're going to put that uniform on, if you're going to like put,
Right.
you know, if you're going to put, you know, pen to page, and you're going to say, I'm telling your story. If I
You got
know
to
it's,
find the truth.
it's
Yeah.
like, you got to show that respect. You know, it would be disrespectful for. I think people think that art, it's just that it's up. You know, that you've got to like create it. It's like, man, you got to do the fucking work, and you got to find out what that is. And I hear what you're saying about like the respect, and look, I think you got to kind of love what you got to love the story you're telling, and you got to find something. But for me, a lot of it also is fear, man. I'm scared shitless when I'm making something, and the only thing I can like absolutely rely on is if you give me a situation where I say, where, okay, at least we're going after truth, like that's our sword, it's truth, like we're gonna go try to get this right and tell the story like it actually happened. Then it's, you actually have a North Star. You actually have something that you can follow. And for me, it's just, it's the only thing that kind of calms my nerves. But you just seem like so steady. You know what I mean? Like, do you get
Well,
nervous about this
well,
shit?
I'm nervous in the sense that my fear is that somebody's going to watch a show I did in Baltimore, a Baltimorean or a Washingtonian is going to read one of my books and say that's bullshit.
Mhm.
He didn't do his
Totally.
research.
Totally.
It's
And
a
then
lie.
you're a chump.
That's all I care
100%.
about. I don't care about what they think in L.A. or New York or
Yep.
anything, unless I'm shooting a show in L.A.
Yep,
about
yep,
L.A.
about LA. Yep, yep. And so is that also, you know, you made The Wire. A lot of people like me think it's the best show in the history of television. You know, painted a picture that, you know, people hadn't really seen before. And you know, look, you guys, you know, you guys use Pat Moran, you guys use local casting, you
Right.
guys filled the piece with locals. Is that same, because there's also a side to you that, you know, nobody knows, but I know it. And that's just like, you know, man, you have a huge heart. And the truth is, I mean, you know, you made all these shows, but you've been making them with the same crew. And those crews, they love you, man. Those crews are there because of you, because of how you treat people, because of how you treat the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's just true, right? And they don't feel that way about everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, they definitely don't. Like, motherfuckers are there for you. And I'm just wondering, like, when you know, obviously that's a hit or miss thing when you're putting people in TV shows. You know, you're putting people from the streets to play parts that are close.
It's a little more challenging because you can get a dud once in a while, but
and then you can get a home
just
run.
did it. I mean, you know that, like the guys that guy you were interrogating in that when we shot in that school.
Yeah, he was in federal prison.
Right, and he walked to work from his public housing, which was right up the street that day. He walked to set.
Yeah,
that's one of the best actors we had on that show. Right,
couldn't ask for anything more. Couldn't I mean,
and you can't get that. You can't get that from casting up in New York and stuff like that.
That's right.
But you also don't get the same consistency. So it is a challenge. You know what I mean?
So I understand why, when that works, how that lends a layer of authenticity. You know, like The Wire, like what we're doing right now. There's a layer of authenticity that you can't get that anywhere else because you're populating it with the real people. And I get that, like there's that authenticity that you're after, that truth that you're after. But as part of it, also, it's just kind of being respectful and being kind of paying reverence to the city you're in by bringing those folks and employing them.
I mean, I really couldn't. I couldn't wait to get back to Baltimore to do what you're talking about, which is
because they need it, man. Like, that city needs it.
Yeah, I mean, they need jobs, but also a lot of those people we met way back, you know, in The Wire, for example, that are like Dewan in the costumes. You know, he was a kid that was hanging around set, and we eventually gave him a job, and now he's pretty far up in one of the departments. And All our security guys are, yeah, you've positively impacted their lives, but they did the same for me.
Right.
I really like production, and I like it because when I get out of the van in the morning and there's 100 people there, the crew, I feel really good. It's like, all right, we're going to make something together today, and I think they're all in their own way. They're all craftsmen, but a lot of them are real artists too. I'm not a bigger artist than they are just
Yep.
because I wrote the thing.
Yep.
And I can't do, it's just words on a page until everybody makes it. Everybody gets together and makes it.
That's it.
I like that. That's the aspect of it I like more than anything. Where when I'm writing a novel, it's all mine. My name's on it. I get more of the love, like, you know what I mean, the ego stuff. But it's not as fun.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I like hanging out with people, man.
Yeah, yeah, you're there, man. I mean, you're in
Yeah.
it, and one of the things that I like most about this production that we just did is just seeing you there with Nick. Like seeing there with your son, and just how like just that relationship, and I can see in your eyes, you're looking at, like that's your son, man, and that's just so. I'm a dad, obviously. I'm real close with my dad. I know how much your dad means to you. You know what I mean? Uh,
It'll mean a lot to my other son. Pete works on the show too. He's in the art department, and it'll mean a lot to them later on. I think it means something to them now, but I know that it was a great gift for me to be able to work with my dad growing up and see a man, what a man's supposed to do, which is to go to work every day.
yeah,
And my father was never happier than when he was turning the key on his business every morning. And he was never happier than when he was at work. And I I do the same thing as far as I'm concerned. I have an office at home, and every day at 9 o'clock, I walk in there and open the door to my business. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
It's mine,
yeah.
and that's what I learned from my father.
Yeah. What would you say, just sort of like about kind of being a dad? I mean, your kids are older, and what are the hardest things about it? What are the best things about it?
It's mostly good. I mean, I'm so thankful that I did it, and I'm continue to be their father. I will for the rest of my life. And and as far as like the adoption thing, I have to credit my wife because we wanted a family, and we were having trouble getting pregnant and all that stuff. And then my wife was adopted, and finally, I said, and she had a great life. I mean, her parents are her parents. That's absolutely so. I finally said to her, "Why are we fucking around with all this fertility stuff? Let's adopt some kids." So we went to the thing, the lawyer, and it's a really weird process. I think it is. They put a bunch of pictures out in front of you, and it's like an array of photos and all these babies, and they say, like basically they say choose one. Well,
Uh,
in choosing one, you're rejecting the other ones. Like there's what you're going to do for somebody by taking them out of that situation, which is usually a negative situation, is a good thing. You know what I mean? But the other kids aren't going to have that experience and
yeah.
stuff like that. So we went to we were in the meeting with the lawyers, and they said to us, "What kind of baby do you want?" And I didn't know how to answer. Well, I did say, I said, "What do you mean, what kind of baby? You mean like what color
Yeah.
baby?" I
Yeah.
didn't know how to answer. I'm just a dumb guy.
Yeah.
I want a son who looks like me,
Yeah. Yeah.
curly hair, big nose, Greek. And so I didn't know what to say. My wife goes, "We want whoever needs to be adopted. Like,
Mm,
leave it to a woman to just like cut through all
fuck
the
yeah.
bullshit
Straight
and
up.
say the right thing. And that's how I got my kids.
Wow.
And it was easy. It was easy because we weren't trying to get a white kid.
Yeah.
Like when Nick came to us, it was like right after our home study. It was like a few months after we started the process. They called us up and they said, "There's a baby coming up from Brazil, and do you want him?" We didn't have anything. We didn't have a crib. We didn't have anything, man. When I went to the office to get him, he was wrapped up in the airline blanket um,
Wow.
from Brazil Air or
Wow.
whatever it is, and they they put him in my arms, and I'm not kidding you, man. As soon as they put him in my arms, I was his father.
Fucking Nick, man. And how about Nick, man? Like, what, like his whole journey? Like, like
He was an athlete and really good. He went to DeMatha. He played football. He wrestled and all, but he got thrown out of DeMatha.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and then,
I know he had gotten into some trouble.
He got into real big trouble when he was 18, like looking at prison kind of trouble.
Yeah. What was that like for you?
It was awful, but it was awful, but having been sort of down that road myself, I knew that it wasn't the end. And he lucked out too, and I think it's because I'm his father. In other words, we went to court, and the judge knew who I was. He had read my books, and he had seen The Wire. The Wire was still on at the time, or it was just after it was over, but he had seen it. He knew who I was, and he gave my son probation instead of sending him to prison. So that's another example, right, of what we talked about in the beginning of this interview.
Yeah.
And I took him down to New Orleans with me to work on the show Treme.
Was that the first set he had really worked on?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was 18. And he's 30. He's been in the business 12 years, and he's a director now. He's a director.
He's a killer, man.
Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep.
Right on, man. Do you is there anything else you wanna talk about here today?
I didn't know what I was doing, when I was writing these books. I really didn't. I kind of learned it on the job, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool? This world that I started in the first couple of books, it's a real world to me. It's Washington.
And everyone's real, right? I mean, everyone's based on someone real.
No, not everybody, but I felt like, why can't these guys walk through other books and appear in other books? Because it's Washington. It's a pretty small town.
What else you want to do, George? Like, what do you want to do, man?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much I want to write about. I want to make a Western. I always wanted to make a Western, and there's more books. I'm going to be working. It's funny. I had I had a health scare earlier this year, and I had a tumor. I had a malignant tumor that I had an operation. They took it out, but the first thing I thought about when I got the diagnosis was not like, well, I wish I had climbed Mount Everest, or I'd done this, or gone to the Galapagos Islands or something. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not done yet. Like, what about all the books I haven't written? And what about the movies I haven't made and stuff like that? And I'm going to keep working until my death. I mean, there's no retirement for me. I'm just keep working. That's what I look forward to.
Yeah.
You can't revise a blank piece of paper.
Right.
So.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Right on.
This is the man right here. It was such a pleasure working with you, man.
Man,
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. Honestly, it's like it was that one was special. But what I said, that I've never met so many beautiful people on a set and on a project, like beautiful,
crazy.
Righteous, amazing people, and every single one of those beautiful people was there because of you. You know what I mean? Because they believe in you and what you're about, and that you walk that walk. So yeah, man, I really appreciate you, man.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
me too.
Thank you. Right on, man.
All right, guys.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you dug what you saw and you want to hear more, subscribe, like, do all that stuff. It'd mean a lot to us. I hope you dig these episodes as much as we dig doing them. You guys take care of yourself.